Hello everyone and welcome back. In the previous lecture I briefly introduced classes, and in this lecture we'll continue our discussion on classes. We saw that we could create classes by using the class keyword. So we simply type class space and then name of our class. Let's say we want to create a class called person. Okay. And then we have colon, new line, indent, and then we pass the first method, which is called the init special method. So we start with our def statement, 2 underscores, and then init 2 underscores, and then we pass self as the first parameter or attribute, and then we pass any other parameter. For instance, let's pass a couple of parameters. Let's say name, last name, and then telephone. So in this special method, we put self as the first parameter. So any method within our class takes self as its first attribute. And then any other attribute follows. In this case, we have name, last name, and telephone as attributes. Then we go to a new line. The next step is we have to, we mentioned that this init method is called when we create a new instance of our class, in this case person. And then within our init method, we initialize our attributes. So let's initialize these 3 attributes. So we say self.name is equal to name, then self.last name is equal to last name, then self.telephone is equal to telephone. So here we are initializing our attributes and we are assigning these attributes to our class attributes: name, last name, and telephone. So self means that we are referring to this specific attribute. This is what self means. So this is a way of telling Python that we are referring to this specific attribute and not any other attribute. So this is how we initialize our attributes. So self.name is equal to name, self.last name is equal to last name, and self.telephone is equal to telephone. So initialize our attribute and assign it to our class attributes. So I mentioned that we use self as the first attribute for all our methods in our class, and we use self by convention. So it's a well-known convention that we use self. Okay, and then we mentioned that if we have any other method, it follows in our class after the init method. And then once we do that, the next step is that we can create an instance of our class. So how do we create an instance of a class? So in this case, we can create an instance of our person class, and then we pass. So our person class takes these 3 attributes: name, last name, and telephone number. So to create an instance, we go to a new line, and then you see here when we create an instance, it has to be at the same level as our class. we don't need to indent it. It has to be at the same level where we have our class keyword. So person, and then so our person class takes 3 attributes, right? So we pass these 3 attributes. So for instance, name, let's say John, and then for last name, let's say Smith, and then for telephone number, let's pass 345 656 8849. So here we have created an instance of our person class, and then we can save it. We can save this in a variable. Let's say x. So x is equal to person. Now if we call x, we see that it's a person instance. So if you call type of x, it's an instance of our person class. Okay? And then if we want to find out information about this x, this instance of the person class, we can simply say x dot, and then if you hit tab, let's hit tab on your keyword, you'll see that it has 3 attributes: last name, name, and telephone. So if you select last name and run it, you'll get Smith, right? You'll get Smith. Similarly, if you hit tab and then select telephone, we get the telephone, right? 345 656, so on. So this is how we can call the attributes of our person class. So we create an instance of our class, in this case the person class, and then once we initialize it, we can use all these attributes in our person's special init method. And notice here that I only passed the 3 attributes: John, Smith, first name, name, last name, and then telephone number here. I did not pass self. So even if self is also an attribute by itself, but you don't need to pass, it's not required that you pass self here. Even if you don't, Python knows that self is an attribute and it will assign it automatically for you. So it doesn't matter whether you pass self or not. However, if I only pass, let me remove this. So let's say I only pass John and then telephone. What do you think will happen? So this will give me an error. Let me show you the error. So here it says the init method takes exactly 4 arguments and we only gave it 3. So the 4 arguments are self, name, last name, and telephone. However, it says that we only gave it 3 arguments, which are self. Self is 1 argument. Even if you don't pass it, Python assigns it for you automatically. So that's 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So 1 argument is missing. So it's important to pass all the arguments or attributes. Okay. So John, let's pass Smith again. Then telephone number.